Thanks for joining us today. Today's topic is what's new in Vault 2022. And I have to say it's a fantastic release. I can't wait to dig into all the new features and discuss them. Again, please feel free to ask questions through the question pane. And I may address them as we go. Otherwise, there should be plenty of time at the end of the presentation to address questions. And before we dig into what's new, I would like to make sure everyone knows about Hagerman and Company. You may have stumbled across a recording of this at some point in the future. You may be new to Hagerman. So just as a reminder, we've been an Autodesk value-added reseller for over 30 years. We have 18 locations across the US, from New England to Southern California. We do primarily sell Autodesk software and provide professional services, training, consultation. But we do also have some products that work with Autodesk Vault to enhance it. Most notably our QVP connection software, our lifecycle connection software, backup connection, and project connection. And if you're not aware of what these products, just a brief description of the main products that we sell. QVP is probably our most popular product. That QVP stands for Query, View, and Print. And the idea is you could get access to Vault via a web browser. Now, the Vault Professional application does have its own thin client. Vault Basic and Vault Workgroup do not. QVP can work with any level of Vault. And it is different from the thin client. One of the biggest differences is that you can pre-configure searches for users, so that if you want to control very carefully how people interact with and find files, make it very easy for them to just type in a search term for specific properties, limit what they can see via searches. QVP can let you do that. And it does use Vault security, so you can make sure that people can only see released data, for example. Our lifecycle connection product adds email notification to the file-based lifecycle behaviors in Vault. So as you may know, Vault Professional does have the change order functionality. That can be a little complex for some people, although I think some changes here in 2022 with Vault Mobile make it a lot more attractive to use company-wide. But if you don't need that, if you want to just add basic email notification to your file lifecycles, we could do that with Lifecycle Connection. And what's great about that is you can configure those emails to very easily. You don't have to go and modify a script or change some custom program. You have a nice user interface to control when emails goes out, who it goes to, etc. And then finally, our backup connection product. It can query an ADMS console backup log file to determine the results of the backup. I don't know how many times I've connected to a customer's Vault server to do some maintenance or help with some configuration and notice they haven't had a console backup in days or weeks or even months. And it's very easy to script those backups. And when we help you implement Vault, we always make sure that happens. But it's so easy to do, it's easy to forget to check on it. And so an account password can change, a drive can fill up. It's very easy for that scripted backup to go wrong for some reason based on password changes or whatever. So something like Backup Connection can send you an email whenever a backup's done saying, yes, the backup was good and here are the results, or no, there was a problem, you need to check on it and maybe start it again. So again, just a reminder, Vault is a great product, but we also have some products that could help you take it even further. So let's move on to now what's new in Vault 2022, which is the heart of our presentation here. And I have to say this release is fantastic. I think I've been working with Vault for 17 years now, I think, since pretty much the first commercial release. And this is by far my favorite new release. It impacts everyone who uses Vault. Whether you're an author creating content in a CAD application or even non-CAD applications like Office products, keep in mind Vault can manage any file type. So the big improvement there in my mind is the integration with Inventor. being able to stay in your product more. We'll see that in a minute. Also some support for some new Inventor features, which are really exciting. So authors are really well covered in this update. For administrators, there are some really significant changes. Changes that have been asked for a long time in terms of providing the ability to attach metadata to users, and a complete overhaul of the database replication functionality, which we'll get into for sure. And then finally, participants. So if you're consuming Vault data, if you're participating in lifecycle, if you're participating in change, this is by far the best release ever for you. So again, this release is just amazing. I can't say enough good things about it. So let's start with the author experience. And the biggest change in 2022 Vault for authors is the ability to spend more time doing what you want to do and not what you have to do, right? I designed in Inventor every day before I came to Hagerman, and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to draw all day and design things and solve problems with cool mechanisms and whatnot. And I didn't want to have to worry about what I'm going to name this file and where it goes on the network and all this. This was before the days of Vault for sure. And yeah, Vault helps with that, but Vault does, require we do some other things like managing lifecycle states and making sure we keep track of the history of files and maybe creating bills of material. And Vault certainly helps a lot of processes downstream, but it can tend to take away sometimes from what we really want to do, which is design and use our CAD tool. So the big change in 2022 to help you remove that need to shift gears, especially. I was in Inventor, now I need to go do something in Vault, so I have to switch applications and go over to this other monitor to do something. We can now see almost everything you'd want to see about the design you're working on in Inventor itself. And I'm just going to go ahead and show you this. What we're seeing here is Inventor, right? We're logged into Vault, and we can show details. That details pane you normally would see at the bottom half of the Vault dialog in Inventor now, and it's dockable. You have your uses and where used information. And it's context sensitive, so you can pick the Inventor browser or the graphics window or the Vault tree, and you'll see that information change in the bottom, right? You can view bills of material information, change order information. You've got the ability to go to the various related records for a file. You can customize this view just like you could in the Vault client. So if you want to add specific properties down there to help you, do what you need to do, it essentially is the Vault, but inside Inventor. You can open from Vault straight from this dialog as well, and even assign items from here, right? And of course, for a while, you've been able to change states in Inventor. That hasn't changed. So, you can do the vast majority of the work that you need to do in Vault now without ever leaving Inventor, which is, I think, phenomenal. And it just works really well. It's very intuitive. It works just like if you're used to the Vault client. So yeah, if you haven't checked that out, please give it a look, because my guess is you're going to be able to spend a lot more time in Inventor now and less time going to the Vault desktop client to do the things you might otherwise have to do. So we have a couple of new properties now in 2022. I think we got a couple last year, a couple of new ones this year, which could be very helpful. Latest release date and latest approver. So latest release date is the date the last released revision was checked in. We'll say checked in. Technically, it would most likely be a lifecycle state change. So the last time a released revision version was created. it's a little confusing, but if you look at the properties in the vault, you'll see what I mean. There's now a initial release date and a latest release date. The initial release date is the first time a revision was released. Latest is the most recent one. And now we also have initial approver, who was the first person to advance it to a released state in Vault, and the latest approver, which was the most recent person. And you can map both of those to a revision block. You know, if you're using the revision table update, you can map both of those to the down to the title block in Inventor. Right. Let's see. Now, the other big update for authors is support for Inventor model states. Now, if you are not familiar with the updates in Inventor 2022, there's some great ones. I haven't had time to dig into all of them. My colleague Mark Dooley did a webcast 2 weeks ago with all the new what's new, and that's available on our webcast on demand on our website. So if you want to check that out, if you missed it. But from what I've seen, one of the biggest new changes in Inventor 2022 is the addition of model states. This is something that I think people have been asking for a long time. It's finally here, and it looks like they just did an amazing job with it. All around, this year's products are just fantastic, I think. But model states, I've been told not to think of them this way, but I personally think of them kind of like iParts and iAssemblies, but all in a single document now. So we have the ability to keep track of, for example, a casting where we have the raw cast component. There's some machining operations that take place after that. We can capture all of those states inside the same document, much like you might have think of it sort of like the weldment functionality that we've had forever, where you could capture, you know, the raw assembly, and then after some pre-weld cleanup, and then with the weld beads on, and then post-weld machining, how you could capture those states. Think of it sort of like that, but for any assembly or part. And this is pretty new technology. This is revolutionary technology, I think, in Inventor 2022. And so Vault needed to support that. And I'm happy to report that it supports it extremely well. So not only can you, keep track of the fact that this thing has got model variations, you can place different variants of the part or the assembly from Vault directly, open directly into one of those model states, but it's also integrated with the Vault item master. So a single document in Vault now can be the primary associated file to more than one item, which is necessary if you're using model states. And how that works out is you've got this one document, you've got different model states. Those model states could have their own unique iProperties, and Vault can understand those different states and capture the different properties into the item master for those different variants, right? So let's take a look at this. And this is just what the model states look like in Inventor. You can see the different states. It's almost like a view, but you're actually impacting the way the model looks. And it actually is defined, I should say. It's very straightforward to add new ones. You could suppress features in one. You can assign items in Vault to these guys, and it's understood, what the materials are. But you can also have different iProperties per model state. So you can see with this component here. Now, in this case, when we check this part into Vault and we create an item from it, it actually has extracted several different items. And so if we go to item here, what you'll notice is that there are several different items that were created as a result of itemizing or promoting this component, right? That's because each of the model states has its own part number. So now we have, in this case, 6 different items that could result from this one Inventor part file. And so that lets you, each of these can have their own independent bill of materials in the Vault item master, but Vault is also aware of these different model states so that eventually, if I need to place that into an assembly, when I place from Vault, I can select the model state directly from the options dialog. So I get the right component right on my cursor. Right? So it works great for parts. It also works for assemblies, right? So if I've got an assembly variant where I've got multiple different, in this case, units here, check it into Vault. When I go to itemize this assembly, it will actually extract each of those model states into its own item in the Vault, and each of those items has its own bill of materials. And you can compare those bills of material as well, right? So if we switch this, we can compare these two. We can see our -04 variant compared to our -00 variant. We can see we've got a few different sub-assemblies in here that each in turn have their own bills of material. So model states are a great addition to Inventor, and Vault supports them in, I think, very intuitive way and a very useful way. Right, so the next new feature for authors, and I think there's less revolutionary about this. This is more evolutionary. Better support for Revit interoperability has been, showing up release after release and update after update. I think the workflow now is very smooth, and it's completely integrated between Revit, Inventor, and Vault. And this would be for companies that design products for the building industry or construction industry. Your product is going into a building somewhere. You may need to show where that product goes in the building, maybe collaborating with an architect. You may get a Revit file from them. It's very straightforward now to take that Revit file, leave it as a Revit file, but reference it in Inventor through the AnyCAD technology. Check all of that into Vault so you can manage everything. And then when there's an update to the Revit data, be it because you got a new Revit file from the architect or because it's internally you created a new version of the Revit file, it's very straightforward to track that revision or version in Vault and update the information in Inventor to make sure what you're putting in this building still fits based on the changes. Right. So let's take a quick look at what that looks like. So here we are in Revit. Revit, it's got different 3D views. The interoperability with Inventor, when you go to place that Revit model, you can actually select which view, so you can get only the components in the model that you need. And there is organization to this Revit model in the Inventor browser. And you can check this Inventor assembly into Vault, and you'll notice the Revit file is going in with the assembly file as a Revit file, and Vault keeps track of all of those relationships. Now, if you want to place directly from Vault into Inventor, you have the ability to do that as well. Notice the Revit file can be managed in the Vault. You can see where used information. You could preview the Inventor assembly that uses it. Now, you can use Revit to manage, or in Vault to manage Revit data. Depending on your use case, BIM 360 might be a better solution, but you can manage Revit data directly in Vault. So in this case, what we're seeing is Revit model changes. We update Inventor with that change. Notice the building's going to change here. And now we could check those changes back into our Vault. So we have this complete sort of round trip capability. However the Revit data updates are getting to you, you can make sure that it gets updated properly in Inventor, it gets updated and tracked properly in Vault, so that you always know you're working on the latest data. And finally, for authors, some updates to duplicate reduction and our duplicate search capability. So if you're not familiar with duplicate search in Vault, this lets you identify parts that have identical geometric definitions. Now, this is not just components that were done using save as, but actually, however the part files started, they could start from two completely separate files, two separate people, two separate environments. If they're geometrically identical and in the same vault, Vault can determine that and flag that for you when you do a search, right? So that's what the duplicate search is. Now, Vault can absolutely tell you what parts are duplicate geometrically. What it can't do, because you really need human intervention, is determine if one component should be replaced with another. Because while geometrically they might be identical, they could have different eye properties, they could be made of different materials, they could actually be mirrors of each other. And so as a person really does need to review all the possible duplicates and determine if something should be replaced in a given assembly. And the change this year is we have some better ability to filter out what shouldn't be a candidate for replacement, right? So we could include or exclude mirror components now. We can include or exclude what are called exact matches, which I believe would be parts that did start from the same document. So a good example would be copy design, that you copied the whole thing, even though you didn't really need to copy all of the components. Vault could show you two files that you copied this one for a new design, you didn't end up changing it. That would give you the ability to replace it. And that exact match would basically say, okay, this is really the same thing. This was almost certainly just a saved copy. It's virtually no problem. It is almost certainly no problem to replace it, right? So that can be really helpful. Also, material differential, if you want to filter that out, but also setting filters based on Vault properties. So now you have a lot more capability to reduce maybe a list of 20 or 30 duplicates down to very specific good targets for replacement. So again, the model state support, showing details inside Inventor, better Revit interoperability, a couple new properties, our duplicate search filtering improvements, just great tools for authors. And I think most of the changes were provided for authors. But we'll see in a minute, you can assign an Autodesk ID, a Vault login ID, and or any of the three Active Directory account to a Vault user account. You can also create attributes to be associated with users. This includes a friendly name, which could have a big impact in your environment, especially if you use the change order functionality and Active Directory, and if your Active Directory accounts have names that don't really link up to the person. Like I've worked with companies where their Active Directory or Windows logins are just numbers. And prior to this release, if you wanted to see comments about who did something in Vault, you would only see those numbers, right? Now you can assign a friendly name to that account so that the numbers are just, what you log in with, and the name is what you see, right? So let's take a look at the new user administration here. So this is on the client side. The dialog I think would be the same on the console side. But notice we have profile attributes. You can think of these properties for users, right? They may or may not be linked to Active Directory, and they can be assigned to either users or groups. Now, the way these manifest is if you create a new user, if you look at a user ID, what you'll see is there'll now be fields for each of those attributes in the user profile dialog, including that display name, which is a new default attribute. The rest of the experience of managing users hasn't changed other than this accounts here, which I want to just make sure we take a good look at this. let me get back to where that was, because I want to make sure we highlight. This is for this user profile. Notice you can associate a Windows authentication method, a Vault account name and password, and an Autodesk ID. Right. So now this user profile really is a user profile, and they have got their rights and roles and permissions inside the Vault, but they can log into it in whatever way makes sense for them in the given context. So I think that's a really fantastic addition for administrative purposes. Right. And again, the rest of the experience is the same, assigning roles, vaults. It is kind of neat too that you can see on the users and groups display what groups that user or group might be associated with. You can customize this view to show any of those fields or attributes, including the groups they might be a part of, right? So you get much more information, and especially if you've got a large user group, you can have a lot more information at your fingertips to help you, manage these users and find people, including the ability to sort and filter, based on those properties. So I think it's a great addition to the software. Now we've got new auditing capabilities. This is something that I think was somewhat lacking in prior releases. I get this question from time to time. We want to know who accessed files. And the auditing this year, the improvements I think are great. There's an audit log now on the server. You can control what gets audited or what gets included in that log. But because we have the different login types now, and with the addition of especially Vault Mobile, which we'll get into here in a minute, I think it was important to atomize some of this information, and we actually do have all of it at our disposal now. We can see for any given user when they logged in, what Vault they logged into, what type of authentication they used, and the client login type. So be it logging in from the Inventor add-in, from the thick client, from the thin client, or even Vault Mobile. In addition, we can see when files were downloaded. Right, so this gives you, there's just so many things you could do with this. Even, in a worst case scenario, disaster recovery, or even if someone deleted a file on accident, you could go back to this log and see, okay, did anybody download that recently? Maybe they still have a copy on their local workspace, right? So even something like that. And this is plain text. It's on the server with the other log files, like your Vault log and your console log and the file store log. It's its own audit log now. So you can parse that with whatever parser you want. PowerShell is a great choice, and even run regular reports off of this kind of thing. The biggest change for administrators, depending on your application, will be this next one, which is changes to replication. So if you're not familiar with Vault replication, there are two methods of replication with Vault Professional. Now, prior to 2022, so Vault 2021 and before, you could always do database replication, or what's technically called workgroup replication, but basically you're replicating databases, or you could just do file store replication. File store replication did not change in this release at all. Database replication or workgroup replication changed completely. So in 2021 and before, replication used what's called SQL Server merge replication. And because of the way it was implemented, you could make changes at any site. So if you were connecting to a subscriber site, you could modify data in that local database that would then get replicated and merged into the primary, or what we call the publisher. And that presented a whole bunch of problems. Most notably, and most user-facing, the idea of object ownership, where your database had to own a record before you could modify it. And if for whatever reason the connection between the publisher and the subscriber went down, you couldn't claim ownership of that record. So let's say you had a case, and we just had a case like this the other day, where a subscriber site went down, and it was in ownership of lots of records. And the facility was without power. They weren't sure when power was going to come back up. Some people needed to modify some of the files. Well, you can't. You can't check those files out if your site doesn't own them. Now, you could, use the nuclear option and disconnect the subscriber from the publisher entirely. That would revert ownership back. But if the power is going to be out for a few hours, that's pretty major undertaking, because now you're rebuilding the subscriber once the power comes back on. So between that and the fact that merge replication isn't well supported by Microsoft anymore, a change really needed to happen. And I think the change that did happen is much for the better. So now it's still a similar behavior. We still have the publisher and we still have subscribers. The big difference is that the subscribers are now read-only. Okay, that lets Autodesk use a different method of SQL Server replication that's more reliable, better supported, more stable. We no longer have the concept of site ownership, and that's because if you want to modify database data, your modifications are always going to happen at the publisher. So yes, you do need to have a connection to the publisher. And in certain situations, there was some benefit to the old model where you could make changes to a subscriber even though you weren't connected to the primary site, and then eventually connect and sync up. But I've also had situations where customers didn't know that the subscriber to publisher connection was down, and it was down so long that those changes could not ever be merged back into the publisher, which is a huge mess, right? So realistically, you do need a constant connection to that publisher. The old method could support it for a little while, but it was always a problem. And so now I think this is by far the better approach. And this is not going to result in significant performance issues either, because through analytics, Autodesk was able to determine that the vast majority of database interaction is read-only. You're searching, you're getting files from the vault. It's only when you check in or change a lifecycle state or modify a property or modify an item do you need to write changes back to the database. And so for those of you that do replication with 2022, you are going to need to rebuild your subscribers. But we had really started doing that anyway across upgrades. And so I don't think there's going to be a big impact in terms of overall infrastructure. But I think there's going to be a big impact, positive impact, in terms of stability and reliability. And the user experience, no longer shuffling ownership. So I think this is a fantastic change for replication. And finally, for administrators, and really for users too, if you install your own software, the installation experience across, I think, most, if not all of the products. I know Vault was this way. I think Inventor was this way. This new installer experience, I think is amazing. It's so much simpler, especially on the Vault side. The two big ones, all of the Vault add-ins now are pre-installed. If you've ever had to install Vault and Inventor and AutoCAD on the same computer, you might know that order was important. You needed to install Vault after the CAD applications. Otherwise, you might be missing an add-in and you'd have to go and repair the installation to add the components you were missing. Don't have to do that anymore. You could install Vault first and then install the CAD products after. The data standard now is much more visible. If you don't use the data standard, I'd really look into it. It can be a little overbearing, but the value it adds, I think, is fantastic. And the fact that you can customize it gives you a lot of options in your Vault environment. But you can now install the Vault data standard just by checking the box. And data standard for Vault, AutoCAD, and Inventor will all be installed together. There's a separate installer for Vault Office. And now there is a new deployment tool that you can create from your account management. I personally have not looked into that. Our service staff has, and their initial thoughts, because they live and breathe installation, are it should be easier and faster to build deployments this way. So yeah, the installer experience, I think, the new experience is great. And now on to the last segment of the presentation, I think the most exciting and certainly the most visually appealing part of this update would be the changes for participants. You know, those people that don't necessarily author data or author a lot of information, but need to consume information from Vault or participate in the change process. Right, and you know, I've been talking with customers for a long time about going paperless. You could do it. I have customers that have done it. The thin client prior to this release certainly helped, but it could have been better. The big hurdle with that is, let's say you wanted to view DWFs. You want to be able to, you know, look at exploded views, or even if you wanted a drawing, you'd have to make PDFs. And yes, we can make PDFs, but only in certain ways. And you can't measure reliably off of a PDF. So a DWF would be what you want, but then you have to install Design Review. So there were a whole host of problems. The thin client in Vault 2022 it's been completely redone. And I keep using the words amazing and fantastic. I think that's an understatement in this case. You know, it solves a lot of these challenges that people have. You know, needing to go to a computer, needing to go to type in information. You got, you know, greasy fingers clicking on a keyboard. That keyboard's going to get filthy. Just having to have a PC at a station, that could be a non-starter, right? You know, what about if you're out in the field? You're not going to be carting around a PC with you. You might have a laptop, but then a laptop is fragile. You know, it's not convenient. You know, you've got to, you know, have internet access somehow to get to a Vault if you're out in the field, right? So there's a whole host of problems that I think the 2022 release solves. And because of that, it's going to open up the ability to use Vault on a more enterprise-wide scale, right? So we're going to start with the thin client. And again, if you've not seen this yet, if you're familiar with the old thin client, this may well blow your mind. I think it's crazy good. The look's completely overhauled. It looks so much better. It supports desktops and tablets, and the primary way it would support a tablet or really, you know, any mobile device is through use of the Autodesk viewer. Now, this is something that prior to 2022, you could only get in the cloud. With 2022 Vault, there's an on-premise version baked into the thin client. Now, it does require DWFs to view, but you don't need to install any other software on a computer or a tablet now to view 3D models and 2D drawings through the thin client. That can all be done in the browser. You can now also access change order information. You can get information on project or folders in Vault. If you're not familiar with Vault, Pro, you can assign properties and life cycles to folders in what we would call projects. That information is available in the thin client, and the ability to multi-select files to view and to download. Right. So let's take a look at this. I think it's amazing. So thin client link, you'll notice when you upgrade to 2022, the thin client links are different. So it will try to redirect an old link, but that is something you may have to look out for. So here's the view tab. This is the new view tab. Notice this is all inside the browser. No other application launched. No file had to get downloaded, right? It's in the viewer. You have the same viewer that you would have essentially in the cloud. You can view the model tree. You can highlight components. You can isolate components. You can do sections. You can do dynamic exploded views. You can take measurements. Everything you could do with that viewer is now in the thin client, right? You have a more intuitive interface, I think, in terms of like uses and where used information. You can customize your properties across there more easily. You can look at historical information if you want to make that visible, right? Look at item information related to a model. Project folder status. Searching is still there, right? Multi-select download, and if you download a whole bunch of stuff, you can get notified when your download is done, right? Just amazing. You can also share links. So what that lets you do is fire up your default email client that will have a link in it to either the thin client or the thick client. You can also view ECOs, including the files that are attached to them, that you could then go and view again in your browser. I love the new thin client. I can't get enough of it. It's amazing. And it is, if you use the thin client in your environment and you found limitations with it, you're going to want to check out 2022 because it is a huge, huge improvement. Now, the other big change for participants would be the introduction of Vault Mobile. Now, I did a webcast on this last fall. I think at the time it was technically a release preview. It is now in production release. It's also available for both iOS and Android, iOS 12 and higher, Android 8 and higher. It does require a license of Vault. You've got to have an Autodesk ID with an assigned license. So it is not free. But the reason it's not free is because you can actually modify Vault data through Vault Mobile. You also do still need to be connected securely to your Vault, meaning you're probably going to need VPN if you're out of the office. I personally don't think Vault I don't think it's a good idea to connect Vault to expose it to the internet, let's say. I've heard there are some things coming that might make it easier to do that in a secure way. So you're still going to want VPN like on your mobile device. But if you're in, say, a shop environment and you want to use Vault Mobile, you could just connect to the same network the server's on inside your firewall, and there you go. Or just if you're in the office and you need to participate in the change process. You can check in and check out files via Vault Mobile. You can use the integrated camera on the device to say scan a barcode and open up something in the Vault. Create and participate in change orders, right? So let's take a quick look at a use case for Vault Mobile. So in this case, we have a salesperson out in the field meeting with a customer, going through a design review. And they've looked at it and it's like, yeah, this is great, but that green color is a little off-putting to me. What if could we do that in blue? So what the salesperson can do is they could fire up Vault Mobile, go and actually find that component, that assembly for the customer, and they can create a new change order against it, right? So let's take a look at that, make sure this is actually the thing we're looking at. Again, this is the same viewer you could see in the thin client, dynamic exploded views, which I think are just the coolest. Right? Yes, this is the product we were talking about. Make sure and query it however you need. Okay, can we get that in blue? Well, let's create a change order to ask, right? So you can create a change order right from Vault Mobile. The file is linked to it. You can add comments, your description, just like you would in the thick client, right? And in this case, attach meeting minutes that you created in Word on your tablet. Add it to Vault, right? That way, the relevant information is associated to the change order for the engineer back in the office, right? So once you've submitted the change order, then back in the office, an engineer, remember, could get an email notification. It could appear on their work list. They could look at this and see, oh, I know Paul's at that customer site. Let me take a look at this. So let me let him know, okay, I'm looking at this right now, right? So a comment, Michelle types that in, and then what's going to happen to Paul is Paul's actually going to see that on his tablet, and the interface is, I think, really cool. It's basically just like a message, like iMessage or text messaging, right? That comes back to Paul. Yep, working on a blue color for another customer. Do you want to work this into the next review with this customer? So while Paul was still there on site with the customer, he got feedback from the engineer without having to make a phone call or anything. You know, you're still talking about whatever. You got confirmation, yes, we can do blue. We'll work that into the next review along with these other changes. We're good to go, right? I think Vault Mobile and what it enables is just amazing. So yeah, that's it. We covered a lot. There's a lot new in this release, whether you're an author, an administrator, or a participant. I think there's something new for everybody. There's something exciting for everybody. And I think it's a great release. I've been working with it for about a month now. I haven't noticed any significant issues with it. So yeah, I would definitely take a look. And if you're currently using Vault Basic or Vault Workgroup, if you've been holding off on that because some of the features in Pro, like especially the thin client, weren't quite what you needed, or if you were looking for something like Vault Mobile, you should really take a look at stepping up to Vault Professional. I think it's really matured into a tool that could be used by the enterprise, especially with the thin client and the Vault Mobile updates. Now, if you've had your heart set on some change to Vault that you didn't see today, don't forget, you can try to make that happen. You can always participate in the feedback community, participate in betas, technology previews. You can help drive the future of the product. And Autodesk absolutely does listen to users. If you're part of the feedback community, you get regular invites to participate and give your feedback. They want to know what you want the product to do and be. If you've got ideas, you think there's a killer feature, or you really want something to be in the product, you can also go to the idea page and get all your friends to upvote. And those changes could get worked into the product. Every release, there are many additions that come straight from the ideas page. Right, and with that, we'll address questions. So a few questions did come in during the presentation. One question, copy design from Inventor. I don't think we can do that yet. Copy design is kind of its own almost little standalone application. There may be some kind of hack you can do to get it to happen from Inventor, but I don't think we can do it from Inventor just yet. That said, you could very easily from Inventor, you could find an assembly in the details pane, essentially go to that in the Vault and then start copy design. So we're talking about a couple extra clicks. So it's not too burdensome, but there's no copy design button in Inventor just yet. Does the details pane work in AutoCAD? That I'm not sure about. I'll need to take a look at that and see. I don't know if the details pane is dockable in AutoCAD just yet. And then finally, what does Replication do for the job server? That's a good question. Now, I don't think that has changed at all with the replication method. What I've noticed with Vault, if you're using the job server and the job processor, whatever server you were logged into when you queued the job, you must have a job processor logged into that server to execute the job. And I don't think that would change. So if you were logged into a subscriber and you queued a job against that subscriber, your job processor would need to be logged into that subscriber in order to execute the job. Now, that's the way it would have worked prior to 2022. For sure with file replication. I don't know that I've actually tested it in a database replication environment, but I would assume for now, until you see otherwise, you would need a job processor logged into either a file server or data management server that the job was queued against. All right, so it's been a couple minutes since the last question came in. So if you've got any more questions, if we missed the chance to submit them, please feel free to reach out to your Hagerman account manager. I think you might even be able to send a question in related to the webcast after, and we'll do our best to get them answered. So I think, Ashley, with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up.
Okay, well, thank you, Boris, for the presentation. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Thanks for hanging in there with that technical glitch. Again, everyone registered will receive an email tomorrow, which will contain a link for the recording. And also a reminder that that short survey will just pop up as we close down today. I don't see anything else, so we will close it down. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for attending.